गाता प्राणों का तार तार, अनुराग भरा उन्माद राग, आंसू लेते वे पथ पखार, जो तुम आ जाते एक बार। हंस उठते पल में अर्ध नयन, धुल जाता होठों में विषाद, छा जाता जीवन में बसंत, उड़ जाता चिर संचित विराग, तुम जो आ जाते एक बार. Those are the beautiful lines by Mahadevi Verma, one of my favorite poetess of Chayavad. Everybody knows about her, and she was also favorite of my mother. Probably I learned to read her poetry from my mother only. You are welcome to Shitala's Conversations, Sunday evening Renaissance show. You're witnessing our 83rd conversation, and I'm really delighted and grateful, also grateful to all of you, all the admirers and followers of this program. And I'm really overwhelmed to know about that our viewers across the globe. The viewership has increased, and we have a very special strata of our viewers who are very great lover of the quality work and know about the stories of the past. It has been a very amazing journey, and we have gone through those spectacular passes. I mean, looking back, I mean, going as far as the millennia and as near as the inner the shore of the century. And we have seen the n number of beautiful bounties, pearls, in the forms of shades, sunshines in our backyard, which was lying in our backyard, which is peeping at us, which needed to be evocated. And these we had the wonderful guests who have come over the span of almost 82 conversations, and they have been able to take us along, catapult us, and move us along to those, evocate those wonderful ambiences, times, the shades, the contours, the colors, the hues. And we have talked very widely, and it's a very informally formal, anecdotal show, which evocates memoirs, which evocates reminiscences, which somewhere down the line, with an intelligent, brilliant, honest, integrated mind, the guest conversationalist takes us to that site, takes us to that place. That's what makes Shitala's conversation slightly different, slightly distinctive. So that is how it is, and I feel very grateful that we have almost touched all the arenas of any civilization. And we particularly now we talk about Kashmir, the crown and cradle of ancient, since time immemorially, about India nestled in the majestic Himalayas. But having said that, I feel that we have been almost able to touch. It has been a humble endeavor to touch almost all the aspects of the civilization, from art to culture to musicology to literature to history to mystery even, and to to these treatises, chronicles, landscapes, ecology, sociology, and all other beautiful and wonderful aspects of bonhomie, good things about those eras, transitions. And that's how this program has gone till now, and it has been taken well. I'm once again grateful to everyone for participating actively and adoring and respecting this program and valuing its content and its essence. Since this is an anecdotal program, I would like to begin with an anecdote. I don't know it's an anecdote, but the style of narration will be anecdotal. uh, I know there was a very I had great acquaintance with, because when I was regular in theater, I was doing theater and I was writing. I was the first theater critic of the state. I was writing not very regularly, periodically, but I was writing the great theater critic, theater reviews. The journey began probably in mid 80s, early 80s, 1980s, and something like that. I was very young in those times, but I had an acquaintance with a great person, that is Motilal Kemu Saab, the Padam Shri Motilal Kemu Saab, the legend, theatre legend. He was a deputy secretary then in the JNK Academy, and many a times he used to tell me that about we would discuss many things, and he used to always tell me that you write very well, your poetry is very well, but your problem with is that you are procrastinated. So, like an elder, you kanman khiste the wo. And I used to sit idly at his disturbing him in his that study room at Apna Vihar, and we used to take tea and talk and talk and talk. And one day he told me, "Chakarakne kihin," as he said. "मैं क्या, what happened, Kimu साहब?" But you are such a brilliant writer. You have critically, you don't work, you have been writing prose. Why don't you write something about Raj Tarangini? It was way back, probably 20, 25 years down the line. In those times, we didn't have this facility of, digital archiving and available these books on the internet and everything. So what I said, I told him that, Kemusab, I don't have any publisher's address where from I can get the book. I want Oral Strain's book. He said, yes, yes, I'll try. And then, like a seasoned elderly gentleman, like we in community we have, he said that no, you will not write to them. I'll fetch you for it. And he probably wrote. And one fine morning, he rang me up. He told me that the book is here. It is, but it's not by Oral Strain. It's by R.K. Pandit. I told him, no, yeah, this is. He said, no, no, this is also very detailed, very wonderful thing. And then when I went to R.K. Pandit's book as well, and then later I found Oral Stein's book as well. So I was very much amazed. I was astonished, astounded by the amount of work they have done, especially in terms of when we talk about Raj Tarangani and the Kalhan's Raj Tarangani, the chronicle, and detailing the enormity. I was really much moved. I said that uh, to me, and a voice came that it is not possible. It's certainly not possible for a foreign scholar, maybe of whatever intelligence, whatever capacity, and whatever creativity, to come to India and then talk about a civilization which they are not acquainted with so deeply, so precisely. So there must have been some great scholarly effort underpinning and reinforcement at the ground level. This is how I questioned Kemusab in those days. I was very young, and he said he gave me the list of the people who were responsible for not only for Holstein, for other people as well as, the great son and other people who wrote the chronicles of those 19th and 20th century. Uh, so I could understand. My curiosity, my inquisitivity was not wrong, but I was literally again amazed about these personalities, these indigenous Kashmiri personalities, who had such a in-depth knowledge, and who were so diligent and so scholarly. So certainly, it always moved me. I was always fascinated by them. But we don't talk nowadays on these subjects. We are normally probably engulfed with the wave of mediocrity all along. I don't know. We as a community should at least make our children to understand, not outwardly, go deeper into these, decipher these personalities. Our today's topic is somewhere related to one of the great personalities of the tribe which I'm talking about. He is the, one of the greatest, amazing. We are going to, I'm going to amaze you to, reveal the life and times of one of the tallest scholar, academician, social and cultural figure of 19th-20th century Kashmir, Professor Nityanand Shastri ji. You must have all heard about him, but certainly when we go nearer to understand him, we are more amazed at his enormity, at his depth, at his simplicity, at his precision, at the honor of knowing him. So, we all know that, there's a history about him, and he was born probably in 1876,
ये बबली
1874, 1874
पेशेंट कम कर
in,
दो सीधा रख
in,
दो
in Srinagar city, and then he was the first Kashmiri to be graduate from the Punjab University, Lahore, and along with that, Aga Syed Hussain Saab. They graduated probably in 1894, 1894 or so, 1896 or so. And then he was also the one first Kashmiri personality top in English, and he was conferred with the medal, I think the head of the state medal of something like that. We'll come to, know about all these aspects about his personality. He was encyclopedia genius who had contribution to the annals of these chronicles, uh, great chronicles, famous chronicles on Kashmir, contributed by the Western scholars like Earl Strain, Grayson, um, uh, Anna Booth, and many others from Howard University, and from one university, that Holland University, from Holland, one university from the Holland. I don't have the name right now, so we'll be just coming through these all aspects during the descent of this discourse. But he had a very speciality with him, that he was privileged to be one of the witnesser, one of the who met the personality, who met the great legendary personalities of those era, especially Swami Vivekananda and Ravindranath Tagore when they visited Kashmir. And he met Ravindranath Tagore probably when there was a facilitation program in Srinagar uh, about his, being conferred with this Nobel Prize award. And then he had met also, he had parlays with these people, and he had witnessed them very close, with a close vicinity. And then he had also been to, he said that he is the first man, first professor, the first legend from Kashmir who has made the Sanskrit learning in Harvard University, who had started, rather initiated the Sanskrit learning in Harvard University. And he was the first Sanskrit professor of SP College, Srinagar. And there are many, many things about him. I mean, it's a very, very long story, and he had a connection and interaction, and he has worked very diligently on all these chronicles, great chronicles written on Kashmir by Grierson, by Earl Strain, and all. I don't know if the personality like him was not around to assist or collaborate with these great Western scholars in those times. What had it been possible that we would have gone through these wonderful chronicles, to which the world of scholars now take as a reference point on Kashmir and Indic civilization? I wonder. I mean, if it was possible without that. Today we have with us a very, well-known contemporary personality, uh, a worthy grandson of Professor Nityanand Shastri sir, and his name is Dr. Surindar Mohan Pandita. Dr. Surindar Mohan Pandita is a very well-traveled, well-known personality. He is a writer, author, a researcher, and a very visiting scholar who has presented his valuable papers on the history, heritage, culture, language on Kashmir to the prestigious universities across the globe, as well as venues across the globe. He's the author of wonderful books on the collaborative scholarship between collaborative scholarship of Kashmiri and Western scholars in 19th and 20th century. He's also a filmmaker. He has been co-directing some wonderful films, and he has scripted. Of course, he's a writer, so he would script them. He has scripted and collaborated with these wonderful films and made on the Kashmir, on heritage of Kashmir. And by profession, he has a very, very multifaceted personality. Also, he has gone into the many wider, crisscrossed to the many wider professional dimensions of the contemporary times. Probably he was a banker. He was a banker, and then he trained the civil servants, and he's in higher technical education. He was a teacher, professor in high tech, and he's taught higher technical education. Besides, he has been into the corporate, this corporate world. He is into the strategic, managing the strategic corporate affairs. There are many things about him. I mean, we can go on and on, but now let's come back to this main core essence of the subject of this today. And before that, I would like to, have a photo tour before we, invite him to this studio. I'll have a photo tour of, this Professor Nityanand Shastri sir. This is a photograph of his respected wife. Uh, I mean, and here he is with the family, uh, the son and the grandchildren. It is some ceremony, some Mekhal ceremony. I mean, we'll ask Surinder about it more. We'll have detailed briefing on this. And then we have, this is his beautiful portraiture, wonderful photograph of Professor Nityanand Shastri sir. And this is one that this is the Rajkiya Pathshala in which the beginning teachers, beginning faculty of Rajkiya Pathshala. I wanted to know more about this Rajkiya Pathshala, but now today our subject is different. So I'll be just knocking at Surindarji's door again and again, making his evenings very noisy to talk about this, especially about this Rajkiya Pathshala. And then this is also a ceremony of marriage or something in the family. And here, this is probably the camp by Orelstein, probably when he was writing and researching on Kashmir. This is very important. And then there are some medals here. This is SP College, Professor SP College. And I think we had some, just a minute. And then we have the letters. Letters I'll be showing you when Surindarji will, take this program further and we'll interact about him. There are some wonderful correspondence between these great writers, great scholars of the West who visited India and researched on Kashmir, Oriental studies, and have been able to make these wonderful chronicles in the 19th and 20th century. I had some Vivekanand's photograph. I don't have it right now. Probably I wanted to show. That was very amazing. That is missing here. Anyway, let's all thank you very much for listening to me in this introduction, and let's welcome to the studio with a great warmth and great affection and great regards, worthy grandson of Professor Nityanand Shastri Sahab, uh, Surinder Nath Pantaji, Dr. Surindar Nath Pantaji into the studio. It's really a great honor to have a personality of his stature, of his personality who has worked so much, so extensively on his father and Oriental studies, and he has preserved all the legacy of his grandfather, legacy of his elders. And he's a very amazing personality. I talked to him last night on telephone. So you got to know many things when you meet him. So let's all welcome him with great reverence and great affection into the studio. Dr. Saab, you are
Jugal,
welcome.
namaskar. It's a
Namaskar.
great honor and a privilege to meet you, having brought me on this platform. Thank you so much. You are kind and generous.
Dr. Saab, again a great honor to see you on the 83rd historic show of Sheetalath Conversations. And certainly, I think we are warm here. Although in North India, as per you are in Delhi and Gurgaon, I am in Chandigarh. So there's no warmth here around. But then again,
No, it's quite cold out here also. There's
you're
no
coming
doubt
to the
about it.
your coming to the studio has reinforced some kind of warmth. So anyway, warmth of the memories and warmth of our legacy through Professor Nityanand Shastri ji. And first of
Thank
all, we'll go to the as per the paradigm and structure of this program. I would like you first of all to let's go and tour, have the reminiscent tour about your childhood as a Sathu boy and your observation of Kashmir, Kashmir and Sathu, Baba Shah, your education, your all the things, all the beautiful things and anecdotes you would like to share with us about Kashmir. Please, sir, please elucidate.
Jugal, first of all, my grateful thanks to you. Let me be candid in admitting that many more illustrious people who are more accomplished, more qualified, more illustrious have adorned your shows, but you have been kind to me that you thought of inviting a lesser mortal today.
Hi, sir.
I hope that the audience remains interested in the subject I'll be talking about and sharing something which I know from my personal knowledge and also what I have acquired through reading, writing, and also in oral traditions.
Right, sir. Right. Please.
I
First of all,
congratulate you for having created a repertory of oral history by way of audio visual documentaries. They will serve in a great way to the
thank you.
posterity. So they have a great value in times to come.
Right.
Now, given your order that I must begin with myself and my reminiscence and childhood in Sathu Barbar Shah. Our family belonged to Upper Sathu Barbar Shah locality, and our family was a single unit family comprising of two houses on the bank of Jugal Koul opposite the SP College Bund.
Don't call.
On the SP College Bund side lived the eminent professor of English, Professor Jagannath Kaul,
Yes, yes.
who later also became head of the Department of English at University of Jammu when I was a student there.
Right, sir.
In fact, Soont Koul separated that two bunds, and on the one side of the bund, towards about 70 degrees from our home, was the back gate, rickety wooden gate of the SP college, which opened on the Soont Koul side. So we were on the Sathu side, on the road side, rather than on the bund side.
Okay.
But what I remember is that our house had some peculiar features. As a young child, as a young boy, I recall that in one of the corners of the embankment, what we called in Kashmiri the Sur, the elevated portion from the bank of the river to the house level, to the ground
Oh.
level of the house, in the corner was an exceptional bush of white roses and pink jasmine, which
Wonderful.
when it bloomed in the springs with the green twigs, presented an exceptional sight, in the backdrop of which was the moving water of Soont Koul. And when the blooms would come out in the summer, I can't recall a better sight having seen by my eye in my entire life of 66 years.
My goodness.
It
Wonderful.
was something out of the world, and I can imagine even the world's best gardens would not present a corner of that beauty. This was one peculiarity. The second one I remember, we had a honeysuckle tree which went up all the 3 floors of the house. And when the windows were open in the house during the summertime, the sweet fragrance of honeysuckle would permeate the whole household.
Beautiful.
So in a way, it was naturally scented. But there is one more feature which probably the audience may find it little stinky, but I'll like to share with you. In those days, the latrines of the Kashmiri households used to be dry latrines, and ours was in one of the corners of the courtyard, on the left side of the courtyard, towards
Okay.
the Soont Koul side. But the beauty of was it that we had a cypress tree abutted in one of the corners of that latrine, and that cypress tree smell would clear all the stink of the latrine, and no one was ever bothered that way he was not going to a hygienic place. So these features of our house are indelible in my mind even at the moment.
That's so wonderful. No wonder.
Originally we belonged to the Kart clan. We became Pandit or Pandita only after my grandfather was given the appellation Panditji for his learning and knowledge.
Okay.
So that's a later on addition, because my grandfather's father, Pandit Madhav Kak, was simply a Kak. He was not Pandita.
Okay. Right, sir.
I'm born in mid-6th decade of the last century, and now myself, I am in the mid-60s of my life.
Oh, great.
I was brought into the world at Ratanani Hospital, which
Same
was
hospital.
close by to the Barbar Shah Bridge.
Same, I was born, sir. I was also born there.
That's wonderful to know. We are both Sathu boys.
Sathu boys.
And Ratanani Hospital was named after the first wife of Dr. Omkarnath Thusu. And unfortunately, Ratanani had died in some fire carnage in Tulamula. And
Yes.
the hospital was named in her memory. Later, Dr. Thusu married another doctor by the name Jagat Mohani Atal.
Jagat Mohani, yeah.
My grandfather had 2 sisters, but no brother.
All right.
The sisters were Vishmal and Katishted.
Vishmal
My
and Kat-
grandfather had 5 children. One, I was told, had 6 children. One, the eldest one, a son, did not survive, but the remaining 5 survived. The eldest were 2 daughters, Devaki and Leelavati, followed by my father Gopinath, who served as President Central Excise in the government of India.
Right.
My next uncle was Jain Pandita, Jankinath Pandita, who retired eventually as Rehabilitation and Relief Commissioner, unlike the relief commissioners of the present day.
Right.
In those days, the commissioner's job was to look after the, those Pakistani displaced people. My youngest uncle, Professor Gauri Shankar, was a postgraduate of mathematics and who did his post-graduation from Lahore University, Punjab, and eventually became a faculty in Indian Military Academy, and then he moved to National Defense Academy, Khadakwasla, Pune.
All right, beautiful. That's wonderful.
Till about 2000 or little before 2000, perhaps all the chiefs of the Indian armed forces, be that Navy, Air Force, or Army, the chiefs were his students at some point of time.
All right, that's so great. That's so great. Nice to know that. Yeah, wonderful.
Yes. Let me come to my neighborhood. Neighborhood comprised of so many Kashmiri Pandit houses and the Muslim houses. We had the famous Khazanchis to the left of our home and to the right
Khazanchi.
of our home. And among us, the Khazanchis, the famous radiologists of the time,
Yes, yes.
Premnath Khazanchi. He was a
Well,
radiologist and our family doctor. A little ahead were the Khars, and one of their descendants, Surindar Khar, till recent times was one of the executive members of the Pamposh Kashmir Education Society. Unfortunately, he expired some time ago.
oh,
There were other Kaks, Ghasis, the famous doctor, Dr. S.N. Ghasi, Professor C.L. Ghasi, who was the first professor of surgery at the Government Medical College, Srinagar. One of the descendants of this Ghasi family, Rajan Ghasi, currently lives in Cape Town, South Africa.
oh,
We had the famous Badams and Ganjus. All of us know the illustrious scholar, Professor T.N. Ganju. He
yeah,
lived
right.
in Upper Sathu area, and his uncle Radhakrishnan Ganju was an eminent Pandit of his days. Also, there was a family called Nandanarans.
Okay.
I remember having listened to the best golden era film songs from a
Beautiful.
Muslim houseboat that was anchored across the Zoot Call on the other side of the bank. And that houseboat owner would put that radio on a high volume so that we could hear those melodies in the setting evening sun sometimes at this end of the border bank also. And those lilting memories can never fade away from my mind.
That's
Coming
wonderful.
to my naughtiness as a small boy or a child, I used to pluck pomegranates from the neighborhood's compound.
And you had a height too.
Though they
You were
were
a,
raw and unripe, I used to bite them or tear them to eat. But I can say, no matter they were raw and they were bitter in taste, but the memory of theirs tastes very sweet today when I recall those moments of my life.
that's so wonderful. That's so wonderful to
Upper
know.
Sathu had a strange demography peculiarity. On one side of the road from main Sathu Chowk, one would go to Khanyar and Ranawari, the other would go to Barbar Shah, Exchange Road, and SP College. One would go to your neighborhood, Sheetalnath, Brekujan, and Habakadal.
Right.
But the other one would go to the Upper Sathu, which ended at Dulgate. But the peculiarity was that this stretch from the Sathu Chowk towards almost up to our house, the two sides of the road had a peculiar demographic distribution. Most of the Hindu houses were on one side, and the Muslim houses were on the other
Europe.
side. There was nothing like you had an interspersed Hindu or a Muslim side in that small stretch. A few houses opposite our house was a small locality mosque with a hammam facilities, and the local Muslims would go for offering namaz and take a hammam bath there every Friday.
Uh-huh.
The main mosque was on one of the ends of the Barbar Shah Bridge, from where blurted the azan. I can't recall that anyone carried any azan from our neighborhood mosque, which was just opposite our home.
Oh,
It was
that
a quiet mosque,
humility, great
and
humility.
people would go to the Barbar Shah Mosque also, but the local ones who were within that small stretch, they would just prefer to go to the one which was in the neighborhood. Also in the neighborhood, little away from our home, down in a lane which led to the bank of the Jugal Koul, was a small neighborhood temple, Gauri Shankar temple. It was built with the efforts of the locals, the neighborhoods, and mainly by my grandfather, and it was a Shiva temple. Subsequently, my youngest uncle was named Gauri Shankar after the deity of this temple, Gauri Shankar. That was Shiva.
That's the
A
one.
little down, after the Sathu Chowk, was the famous Moonlight Tailor. Then there was our family barber, Subhan Barber, the
Subhan.
local Ali Jan, who treated all kinds of diseases that we would suffer from,
Healer.
was
Healer.
Jagannath, a compounder in the locality. Towards the Barber Shah side, we had two butcher shops, the Babar Puj and Salam Puj, and from where our family would fetch the little required mutton for the family consumption. On the Barbar Shah side, also in the byline, stood the famous Mahila Mahavidyalaya school for the girls.
Right.
And for long many years, our eldest sister was a teacher there. And for some time in the later part of the Mahila Mahavidyalaya history, Professor J.D. Zadu was the principal, who happened also to be our relative. That I'll come later.
Right.
My earliest memories of my childhood take me to the snowfall, large hanging icicles from the shingle roof of our home,
Shisharghat.
playing shinijang, shishargant, yes, playing cricket with a wooden ball, beer, and the
Ah,
bat was zinhut, the cut log of the wood. Nobody could afford a bat. That was something. And running paper boats in the running water of our house drain. These boats were prepared by my Bua, my Prof, when I used to tear some of the illustration pages from the manuscripts or books of my grandfather's library, and she would make nice boats. But today, I regret that unfortunately at that time, while the family gossiped, no elder ever prohibited or scolded us that you are doing something ugly and nasty. Those illustrations were wasted in that flowing water. And today, when I recall, the thrill was childish. But today, when I have grown beyond 60s, I feel the great regret something of our legacy and heritage was lost in my foolish, childish thrill.
yeah.
But that was how the paper boats were made by my aunt for my pleasure.
That's the one.
I would like to highlight one thing of my early childhood. At the time, Kashmiri community was divided merely into two small sects, Bhatt and Musalman,
Bottom
or
Muslim.
Kashmiri Pandits or Kashmiri Musalmans.
Muslim.
Even the word, nobody used Kashmiri Muslims. There was no question of talking, he is a Kashmiri Mussalman. We were butt-cut, and the Muslim boy was a Mussalman coat or simply Mussalman.
That's
The
wonderful.
present day nomenclature, which we are becoming more familiar day in and day out, that we are Kashmiri Hindus, never existed in those days.
It didn't exist
Nobody
those
called
days.
us Kashmiri Hindus then.
We called
Of
butter
course,
butter.
we always remained Kashmiri Brahmins. We were simply nothing more, nothing less but Bhattas.
That's true, sir. That was a
As a
great time.
child, my mother would often send me to fetch milk from the local milk vendor, the Gur, Raza Gur.
Yazagur.
And the best place in the winter was to go to his cow shed, which was a remarkably warm place, and it had such an ambient temperature that even the best heaters and air conditioners of modern day will not match that. What a natural thermostat. And sometimes it would take us to the Ganaipuj's
Ganaipu.
cattle shed where he would keep his sheep, and that was equally warm. So they were the best places in the winter I recall and remember today. As a child and a young boy, I could frequent the neighborhood furloughs, which were limited to Ramchandran Mandir, Pache Bagh, and Dharamdas Temple. Pache Bagh was a locality more towards the Dalgate side, and it was a low-lying area which used to get flooded during the rainy season. And later it became a residential colony by the name Nehru Colony. Not so much after the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, but the owner of the land was
Was a
one
Nehru.
Vishambarnath Nehru, who I
Oh,
have never known what he used to do. But the colony was called as Nehru Colony, and I have
that's,
played plenty of cricket there.
oh, that's so great.
Dharamdas temple had a reputation that at some point some Sant Mahatma used to be there by that name, and he had many miraculous things attributed to him. And he would live in that precinct at some stage, which I am not aware. He had a great reputation. His memory lingered in the records of the folklore. I can recall that Hinton Knowles records of this man Dharamdas by saying, Sant gai tim yim mutrasit traimikaran son. You know, that he would urinate and copper would become gold. But Knowles, as a rationalist, as a British missionary with an English mind and mentality, made a very, sly remark to this reputation by saying that this old man was too old even to piss or urinate. Discounting that adage that he used to convert copper into gold by simply urinating on it. That was Dharmadas and the saint's reputation. The stretch between Barbar Shah to Regal Chowk was often isolated, and very few people would frequent that stretch. Maybe sometimes some boys, some children going towards SP school or SP college, but it was not a very frequented road. Many times people would take the exchange road side towards the Jhelum River, towards the Chootkol end, and then go to Amira Kadal and KMD bus adda. One side of this stretch of road from Barbar Shah Bridge to Regal Chowk had barracks of the militia unit, those who were called as Khoptam Fakirs. And
Apna
many people, Khoptan Fakir, and
Gautam
many
Pakir.
people would also call them Kuntra Panda in some derogatory way. Probably
Kuntrupanda.
their salaries were 29 rupees and 15 annas. I don't know much.
I
But
think
that was how.
Dr. Saab,
Uh,
we need to sum up this first segment because we are almost
yes,
40
yes, I'll sum
40
up.
minutes have gone through. We have to come to
I'll
the main
sum up.
subject. This is very
I'll sum up.
interesting, beautiful narration. We'll have the complete narration on some other day,
As a
but you can
young
sum up.
boy, as a young boy, I was home tutored up to class 3,
Why so?
and I had a teacher by the name Shamlal.
Shamlal ji.
Shamlal would come at 10 and leave at 5. I would finish all the syllabus of all the subjects of all the full year in one single day, every day. So it was a nightmare for me. But at class 3, I was put in Biscu school straight away. And I was escorted by a young boy, Premnath Khazanchi's son, who was my junior and smaller in height. And he used to handhold me up to the Biscu school, bring me back safe, and hand it over to my mother. That was it. At school, my teachers were R.K. Kao, Edgar, Shamuna Durrani, Kadir Mir,
Sattar
Satlal
Razan?
Rajasthan. The school boys were segregated in 4 houses: Kolahai, Mahadev, Tratkuti, and Haramukh. I belonged
Harmo.
to the Haramukh house.
Okay.
And also we had sports, regatta, swimming, cross-country run up to
Cross country race.
Shankaracharya. These are the memories I have. I left the school when the tall, lanky Eric Biscu had just left, and a shorter principal, John Reid, had joined the school. That
So
was my school days.
tall man goes with tall boy goes with tall principal.
No, I left the school when John Ray was there, and my father was transferred to Jammu, and we
Okay.
moved to Jammu. At Jammu, I went to Bright Candles, followed by SD Sabha Higher Secondary School. The other
Bright
popular
candle? Bright candle?
Bright Candles, it was in Ustad Mahalla.
Okay, I don't know about it because Jammu. I'm also lived in Jammu. But
Yes,
you were an alumni of Prince of Wales, GGM Science College. I also studied there.
yes, I'm a student of GGM Science
All
College
right,
when
beautiful.
Dr. SM Iqbal was the principal.
All right, great people. Your Professor Thusu was there, Professor Nehru was there, Professor
Yes, Thusu Sahab used to
Rathore,
teach us English. Yes,
English is
SP
when Thusu
Bakshi
was
was there, Professor Malla was there, R.K.
there. It was
Chipper was
all
there,
Kashmiri
all those people.
professors, dominated by Kashmiri professors.
Yes, I
Beautiful
did
place.
my graduation from Science College, followed by my post-graduation, and then I had an aborted career at Kurukshetra in National Dairy Research Institute, Karnal, where you
NDRI.
had previously the guest, Dr. Tej Kishan Walli. He
Yeah,
was
Tej
my
Kishan Walli.
senior and a guide also.
Oh,
Yes,
I used to know about that. Wonderful.
yes.
And your UK Jalali Saab, Advocate General, the famous advocate from Jammu, he had written.
He was doing his law, I was doing my chemistry. He
Okay.
was also my class fellow.
He was also, but I have a resemblance of you. I have probably seen you somewhere. Probably you lived in which area, Julaka Mahalla, or in those
No,
times?
we lived in Mahinder Nagar and Kachi Chhavni.
Mahinder Nagar, Kachi Shawni, yes,
Mahinder
because
Nagar,
Kachi.
yes. We
Yes,
had a
I have
house
seen.
in Mahinder Nagar, 40 Mahinder Nagar.
You were tall. You could be distinguished from any side, and we were very young in those days. So we used to always to be. I
Yes,
mean,
yes. I have been always a walking stick, tall, lean, 6'1".
but that's their great
I don't know
advantage.
if we have crossed in GGM Science College. I have no
No, no,
memory.
I don't know. I
You
mean,
must have
I
been
don't.
you must have been my junior.
Yes, Junior, certainly by all standards
I was Jalali's contemporary.
because Jalali साहब was हमसे senior थे काफी मतलब काफी I don't know how much but we were senior वो तो पहले
Yeah,
ही
yeah.
निकल गए थे yeah
Must have been a couple of years.
couple of
That's
years.
all I can talk about myself. And
Thank you, pleasure. You brought the nostalgia of GGM. I want a lecture on GGM Science College. I'll ask you, Jalali Saab, all to join in that particular lecture because I have another nostalgia about that. Kashmiris who served here as teachers and who lived in Jammu, especially the nostalgia of those times. Anyway, let's move forward now. We are going to talk about this legendary personality.
you talked about teachers. You had Sharabi Saab, Khar
Sharabi
Saab,
Saab was there.
Surindar Pikku, SP Bakshi, all those.
Tipu Saab was there. BL
Yes.
Rana was there.
Botany.
Yeah, botany was there.
Yes, please.
Let's come to the subject of today's main subject, prime subject. That is about, we are going to talk about, decipher and know about this great personality, great scholar, the great academician, social and cultural personal figure, this encyclopedic genius of those times, whose presence is almost in all the chronicles of the great chronicles, Oriental chronicles written by the Western scholars. And you have probably you have written some 5 7 books I quoted and I mentioned. You also written this collaborative scholarship between the
Collaborative scholarship in Kashmir during the Dogra period,
yeah,
19th and 20th century.
during the Dogra period. So it is a
Let's,
wonderful thing. It's a wonder you have worked already on it. So let's begin with, first of all, let's begin with the raw style, and let's begin with the life of this.
let's go with the subject. Sundries are over. Let's
Yeah,
go
yeah.
with the subject
Yeah,
now.
that's what I'm saying. I'm asking you about the subject. That
Yes,
let's begin with his earlier life, his growing years, and his finally going to Lahore. Let's talk about his first part first.
yes.
Then we'll go on to other things. Yeah,
Let me
please.
begin. My grandfather belonged to a generation which produced an n number of distinguished scholars of that age. My grandfather was born in a conventional Brahmin family on June 24, 1875, to his father Madhavkat and mother Amravati. He was a
Amravati.
precocious child, fired by the zest of learning and knowledge. And I have two small examples to share which would justify that what kind of a bright student or a bright person he must have been. I have learned it in my family that when he began going to his early school in the 18th, having been born in 1874, it was the time that missionaries also had placed the first missionary school in Srinagar, what was known then as Knowles or Doxy School. Now, the missionaries evidently started teaching the English alphabet from the primer. And somehow, my grandfather also laid his hands and acquired an English primer to learn the English alphabet. No one in Kashmir knew English alphabet before 1881 until the missionary school was established. Now, what this young boy would do, that he would go to the bank of the Soot Call or get into some willow grove or in the bylane and try to read. Once the neighbor of my grandfather, my great grandfather, he saw him reading this English primer and complained to my great grandfather that your son is going haywire. He is probably getting influenced by Christianity, and I saw him reading English primer. Back home, the father thrashed him, gave him a scolding, you can't do it. And that was it. And he couldn't do much. So the primer was gone and the boy was, dissuaded not to continue with the English study. Later on, my grandfather managed to pick up another primer. And he told his father that I'll do a prayashchit by going to Shankaracharya temple and atone for my wrong.
Okay.
What
Yeah.
this young boy would do is carry the primer in his ferran, reach the mountain top, and read again the English alphabet under the moonlight. That's how he learned English,
Oh my God,
which
that's
he
so
was
wonderful.
which he was discouraged not to learn as a small boy. The second was my grandfather was the most favorite pupil of the most accomplished Sanskrit scholar of his age, Pandit Damodar, whom Stein and Buhler have held in high esteem. Damodar died in 1892 when my grandfather must have been 74, 84. He must have been about 17 years, 18 years old boy, 18 years young man. My father would say that often we would ask my grandfather that how did he learn so much and got so much of education and he became so well known and scholarly in his temperament? What were the reasons? My father recalled that once Damodar had died, and till my grandfather was active, until paralysis had struck him, for almost 40 years, my grandfather would do parikrama of Damodar's house every day before he would go to the school or to the college.
That's so amazing.
Not one day, not 1 year, not a decade. For 40 long years, he would do parikrama of Pandit Damodar's house and then begin his day.
My goodness.
That was the precocious child. My grandfather began his career as a school teacher of the Rajkiya Pathshala, which was established by the Dogra Maharajas. He started his school career from 1892 to 1915. And
Just a
during
small,
this period,
just a small intervention, Surinder
yes,
ji. I would like to
yes.
ask you, what was the location? Because I have worked on this topic of Rajkiya Pathshala, but I didn't find much of the inputs. So, if you know about it, where was exactly it started? Where did it exactly start?
Rajkiya Pathshala had two destinations. One
Right.
was near Pampur and one was more towards downtown between Habakadal and Earthkal. The
Habakadalan?
first one was in the downtown, but later it became a state school and was shifted to Pampur.
Okay.
Because I have a document in my grandfather's collection where the Home Minister of Pratap Singh writes about Lord Minto's visit to this state school at Pampur, where my grandfather was also a teacher.
And
And that's 1906.
he welcomed him in Sanskrit, first Sanskrit.
He addressed him in Sanskrit and he read the welcome address.
Okay.
Now, during this period, when he was a school teacher at the Rajkiya Pathshala, he prepared the first Devanagari primer of the Kashmiri language, which I don't know whether people have appreciated or known that. Before that, all the primers of Kashmiri language were written in Persian. I have the names before them. Gatjaru God, Kashir Lekhnist Parnich Godnich Kitab, Parnuk Qaid, and the third one was Kashir Godnich Kitab. These were produced towards the close of the 19th century. My grandfather was socially very sensitive. My mother often recalled that many a times he would leave the house for school or college in a pashmina farran or a woolen farran, and when he would return, he was simply in pose. He would have given his woolen clothing to someone else who needed more than him. A kind of a person, a philanthrope or a kind person, kind-hearted person.
Kind-hearted, compassionate.
It was said that whenever he walked out of his home, people used to peep out of their windows to have look of this auspicious, this saintly person. People would feel happy to see him going around.
That's okay.
The legend of the family says that he would hardly go to SP College walking down via Barbarsha Bridge. Often he would take a small boat on the Toothkol and enter the college from the back bund side of that rickety gate, the opposite side. So he would take a small boat. He was always philanthropic, carry some quantity of coins in the pockets of his parent, both on the left side and right side. The legend says that when he would meet some needy on the right side, he would put his hand in the right pocket, and if the needy was on the left side of him, he would put his hand in the left pocket and pull out some coin and give it away to him. That was his way of life. Till 1915, he remained a school teacher, Rajkiya Pathshala teacher. But transition to school, from school to college, is a story worth recalling. During this time, 1915, 16, and 17, Maharaja Pratap Singh's law minister or the justice minister was one judge from Lahore named Kanwar Sen, Justice Kanwar Sen. He was a
Justice Kanwar.
widower. When he landed in Kashmir, he sent a word to SP College principal then, Iqbal Krishan Sharga, that would you have somebody in your college with whom I could talk on spiritual things and religious things and academic interests so that I could spend my time fruitfully, because I don't have a family with me, I have come alone. Iqbal Krishan said, well, we may not have such a person in the college directly, but I know there is a school teacher in the Pathshala who is person you can try. So on Iqbal Krishan Sharga's recommendation, my grandfather was sent to meet Kanwar Sen, Justice Kanwar Sen, and spend some time with him. Kanwar Sen stayed in Kashmir as justice minister, as law minister, for a year and a half. But before he left the Maharaja's service, he left a note with Maharaja Pratap Singh that why are you wasting a very bright teacher at the school level? His services need to be utilized at a little higher level in the college you have on. And lo and behold, before Justice Kanwar Sen left Kashmir, again for Lahore, my grandfather was taken out from school and posted as professor at SP College. Thus, he became the first native in 1916 to become a professor in SP College. So it
And
was a meteoric leap.
was he a first graduate? He was a first graduate from Kashmiri
He was
community,
the
like
first graduate
Aga
in
Sayyed Hussain.
1902, stood first in English examination of the university, where all the students from all parts of India who knew English before the Kashmiris knew, competed with them, and there is a medal given to him by the then governor, Manmohan Nath Kaul.
Manmohan Nath Kaul.
Jugalji, it will interest you.
Yes,
We
sir.
all
Beautiful.
know calls write Koul like you have written, or most of the calls write Kaul.
Yes, sir.
But Manmohan Nath Kaul was an exceptional call who used to write Kowl.
That's so
I
funny.
have never known another Kashmiri call with that spelling, Kowl.
And then there is one German call, that is KOHL, but that
Call,
is the
yes, Helmut Kohl, who was the chancellor also.
chancellor also. Yeah,
Yes, Helmut Kohl, tall,
Helmut Kohl.
burly fellow. Yes. Coming to his, my grandfather had a stint with two principals in SP College. One was Iqbal Krishan Sharga up to
Sharga.
1921. From 21 till his retirement in 1931, it was Lawrence McDermott. So he had an Indian principal, an old Kashmiri principal, and an Englishman, McDermott. Among the college, in his faculty, his colleagues were Professor Gyani Ram, Professor Kanji Lal, the famous editor of the Nilmat Puran, who did jointly with Professor Jagdar Zadu. Sundar Das Malhotra was another professor whose son, O.P. Malhotra, later on became the chief of the Indian Army. He was also his colleague. Then there was Professor B.K. Madan of economics, Professor A.K. Kichlu, who later became the principal of the college also. I really don't know whether my grandfather ever officiated as a principal. It's not in the records.
Okay.
But Grierson in Kashmiri Ramayan writes a
Kashmiri
reference that head of the SP College, Professor Nityanand Shastri. Now, whether he was an officiating principal, whether he meant something else, I cannot confirm. And
But how
same
does
goes true. Same goes true about Professor Kanji Lal. Kanji
Kanji?
Lal was also an officiating professor in 1931 and 32, but the official records of SP College do not count him as principal. And so does my grandfather not appear as a regular principal or an officiating principal. Grierson is the only person who has mentioned head of the SP College.
But I think this is for the consumption of the common man, whether he was head or he was already a celebrity who transcended the boundaries of time and
I'm
time.
only saying in terms of the college position he
College,
held.
college, yes.
Like Kanjilal
Record.
also.
Yeah.
I have documents, I have seen documents where Kanjilal has signed officiating principal SP College, but in the official records, they don't count him.
Probably they would say that it is fire. that log नार तो मोकले सो रही अशन पाथई वहाँ कश्मीर
No,
में
that's
कॉमन है.
something, that's something else. One can always take any excuse.
Fire is a great excuse in Kashmir. Yeah.
My grandfather met Swami Vivekananda in 1897,
That
and there
is
is a
something I
famous
want to know
photograph
about. That is
with
really
his
interesting. Really interesting. Tell us something about.
Lord Minto visited Kashmir in 1906, and the welcome address in Sanskrit was read
That's
by
the
my
first time.
grandfather. Then the third occasion in 1912, he had to attend the knighthood ceremony of Orlstein when he was
Oral
knighted
style.
and
That is
became Sir
something really.
Orlstein. Hardly people would know that Stein was knighted in Kashmir, not in England, not elsewhere in anywhere in Europe. And the Viceroy, Lord Harding of Penhurst, came all the way
Lord
from
Harding was also
England
there.
for that function to accord him. So that was one.
Any
And
anecdote?
1914,
Any
yes,
anecdote?
please.
Swamiji's visit. Of any anecdote? Any? You must have heard orally from your father or grandfather about.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. In fact, discovering my grandfather having met Vivekanand itself is another story for another time.
That will do something. That will do definitely.
Then last in 1914, when Rabindranath Tagore visited Kashmir for
After Nobel
felicitation,
Prize.
when he wrote his poem Bakala and all those things on the on
Yes,
his
yes.
houseboat and all that. So there was a public reception for this man, and one of the participants was again my grandfather in that assembly. So in a way, he met two viceroys face to face. He met Swami Vivekanand and Rabindranath Tagore also.
Tagore as well.
Among my grandfather's notable students, the first and the foremost I would recall, the famous iconic T.N. Call,
Ambassador.
Ambassador, Foreign Secretary, and architect of India's foreign policy.
Foreign policy. Yeah. In those times, Cold War times.
My
Especially.
grandfather also taught Pupul Jaikar, daughter of P.N. Mehta, who was development minister to Hari Singh, and later on she was recognized as Zarina of Indian culture.
She wrote a
Pupul
biography of
Jaikar,
Indira
the
Gandhi.
great,
Indira Gandhi's
the great
biography.
woman who promoted handicrafts and
Pupul Jaikar.
khadi.
Close associate of Indira Gandhi, and she wrote her biography as well.
Yes. She has written her biography also. Pupul
Very
Jaikar.
close associate. Yeah.
Two of his students were later the army chiefs of India, General Chaudhary and General Bevur. Both became the chief of the army. Another student was Mir Ghulam Rasool, chief engineer, first Kashmiri Muslim chief engineer, and who later became the chief architect of the modern Hazrat Bal Shrine.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
In the modern times, in late 60s, he was his student. And last not least, the famous historian P.N.K. Bamzai was also in the college during his time. And I recall an anecdote he once shared.
Please share.
That after my grandfather retired, the students were spellbound and they said, Ghost of Nityanand is roaming around in the college, least knowing that after retirement he had an extension granted by the Maharaja in the interest of Sanskrit learning in the college, and also for higher learning. They didn't believe that after retirement, how can he take the class again? And last not least, informally, the spy master of India, R.N. Kao,
Arey, yeah, wonderful,
also
wonderful.
studied some Sanskrit with my grandfather in Lucknow. He was an informal student. He had a curiosity to learn Sanskrit,
That's
and
good.
that's how. Because my grandfather during winter breaks would never stay back home. His abodes were going to Banaras, going to Mathura, going to Kashi, going to Lahore, Lucknow, centers of learning. And there he taught R.N. Kao informally because he
Cowboy.
loved studying
He
Sanskrit.
is known as cowboy, 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 cowboy,
KAO, cowboys.
Cowboy. Great spy master, great spy master. Wonderful personality.
Now coming to my grandfather's association with Stein. My grandfather in 1892 went for his examination as a student for his Visharad examination, probably intermediate in Sanskrit.
Right.
And the examination was conducted at Lahore. At the time, in 1892, Stein was registrar of the Punjab University and principal of the Oriental College.
Oralston.
Oral Stein was
Oh,
principal. He had dual posts. He held the post of registrar of Punjab University and also the principal of Oriental College. And it may perhaps surprise some. He held these two positions at the age 26.
my.
He was 26-year-old man holding the position of registrar and principal of the college. When my grandfather presented himself as a student for the examination, there would have been very less number of students. There is where Stein and my grandfather encountered each other. Probably he came to the examination center, was invigilating, supervising something. He found this boy very bright and brilliant, and the friendship started beginning. They became friends, and later on they became lifelong friends and collaborators until the time my grandfather expired in December 1942. So in a way, an association of 50 long years, 1892, 1942, that's exactly 5 decades.
And the ancient geography of Kashmir and Raj Tarangani by
Yes,
Oralston. Your
it
your
was,
grandfather had to do a lot of things. Yeah.
no, Stein did his Sanskrit edition of Raj Tarangani by 1892. My grandfather, Mukundram and Sahaspat, they helped him during the translation of the English Raj Tarangani into English because
Oh,
he added many notes and interpretations of the ancient history, which he acquired from my grandfather, partly from Sahaspat and from
husband.
Mukundram Shastri.
Mukundram Shastri. Yeah.
But the chief Pandit on whom Stein relied for his Raj Tarangani was none other than Pandit Govind Koul.
Pandit
Govind
Govind
Koul,
Koul has a great mention. Yeah. In all this.
Stein once wrote to his elder brother Ernst Stein, my best Indian friend. That was the title he had given to Govind Koul.
My best
About
Indian.
Ishwar Kaul, Stein called him Epiphany of Panini. He was such a great grammarian.
Grammarian. Yeah. Grammarian. Pan.
Stein
Another
spent
Kashmiri. Yeah. Ancient Kashmir.
55 years in and out of Kashmir. All his 4 expeditions started from his campsite Mohanmarg, and every time he would return via Ladakh and Gildan, get back to Mohanmarg. All his Central Asian reports, running into thousands of pages, were written on Mohanmarg camp.
Oh.
Stein's other favorite haunts in Kashmir were on the Dal shore, in Danthan village, Ishbar
Nandha.
camp, Nagin lake, Sometimes Raja Amar Singh's, royal retreats, the Kaplas Villa, the Almond Cottage, and many a times he would tent near the Sathu Barbar Shah Chinar Bagh, where my
Chinab.
grandfather had a very little difficulty in meeting him. Stein visited my grandfather's home for 4 decades. After he moved to Central Asia in 1900,
Yeah.
Stein became a pivot for every European Indologist who came and worked on Kashmiri chronicles, Kashmiri subjects, whether literature, language, history. And for Stein, since he was away in Central Asia exploring the vast regions of desert lands and remote places, for him, the ultimate reference was my grandfather. So the axis was all European scholars, Indologists who came to Kashmir, Stein at one end, the middle point was my grandfather,
He
and
was
the third point was other Indologists.
he was the
So
fulcrum. Your grandfather was the fulcrum and main pyre around which this whole bar went.
I think, I don't know how many people will agree to it, but I have no hesitation in saying, had Stein not come to Kashmir, all the treasures of our past glory of literature, history, and culture would have never become known to the Kashmiri Pandits themselves.
That's so true.
You know, between 1888, when he first came to Kashmir,
1888.
till 1905, Stein collected 368 original manuscripts from Kashmir, carried them to Oxford, and deposited them in 1911 in Oxford archives. Fine. His teacher Buller, before him, 13 years before him, in 1875, collected 300 manuscripts, which he carried in 6 tin-lined boxes that they would not rust with moisture, and carried them, deposited mainly in the government collections in Gujarat and Bombay Presidency, which finally became the core collection of Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute. So 368, 300, 668 manuscripts, the original copies, the main copies.
Surindarji, I have heard one incident, whether it is true or false, that this Raj Tarangni script was washed away somewhere down. It fell somewhere, and
Yes,
is that
I'll
anecdote?
tell you.
Yeah,
I'll tell you.
please let us know.
When Buller was Stein's teacher at Vienna, when he was doing his postdoctoral studies, Buller had been called to collect manuscripts from private libraries in Kashmir in 1875. He surveyed 22 libraries of Kashmiri Pandits, which had the most of the manuscript wealth. So he collected all those manuscripts, 300 from those libraries. And at the same time, he was inspired to locate the original manuscript of Raj Tarangi. Till then, all the partial Tarangas, which were translated and edited by European scholars like Coolbrook, H.H. Wilson, and French translator Troyer, they were partial. But Buller was such an expert of paleography, reading old inscriptions and old scripts, that he knew that all those translations are defective. We need to find the original. So the original for him was a manuscript in Sharda, written quite earlier, and he came to search. There was one family in Kashmir, the famous Shavite, Shivopadhyay, in whose family it was reported that for 9 generations, it was the only family which had the original manuscript of Kalhana's Raj Tarangi.
And preserved.
So in 1875, when Buller wanted to have the copy of this Raj Tarangi, the owner did not allow him more than a glimpse. He said, it being sacred and he being Christian, you can't touch, it will get defiled. So Buller was disappointed that he could not even touch Raj Tarangni manuscript with Shopadhyay.
Oh God.
Now
What
what happened? He felt satisfied, at least I have located it exists, and we can prepare a very scientific and correct edition, not a corrupted one, which Troyer, Colebrook, and Wilson had copied
collected
from
from
Moorcraft's version, which
Moorcraft
he
work.
had
Moorcraft
copied.
had done
So
nasty
the,
work.
so the copy was faulty. Now, this story of Buller's disappointment, Stein heard from his teacher in Vienna. So 13 years later, when Stein got opportunity to come to Lahore for his appointment, he said, why not try and go to the nearby Kashmir and see if I am lucky to get hold of the Raj Tarangni.
Raj Tarangani. Oh, so wonderful.
But by that time, things had changed. Shivopadhyay had died, and the person with whom this was Keshav. So
Keshav was the
Keshav
same
was
family?
son of Shivopadhyay.
Okay.
But Buller found that but Stein found that Keshav also had expired, and Raj Tarangni was divided in 3 parts amongst his sons.
My goodness.
Because nobody wanted to part with his legacy, his portion of the heritage. And in the process, it's told by Stein that few pages were lost, which were eventually restored by Jugal Koul from his experience of Kashmiri traditions.
Oh, great.
Now, through the help of Raja Suraj Krishan Kaul, who was the member of Maharaja Pratap Singh's Royal Council as a
Royal
revenue
Council.
member. It was a coincidence that Suraj Kaul's son, Raja Hari Krishan Kaul, was Stein's student at Lahore. So Stein told his student Hari Krishan Kaul, why don't you tell your father and help me in acquiring the Raj Tarangni manuscript? Suraj Kaul prevailed on these 3 brothers, and it took 1 year of diplomacy and tact until Stein got all the 3 portions in his hands to prepare his own edition of the Raj Tarangni. But before doing so, the grateful Stein took the manuscript to show it to his teacher, who had only the glimpse of the manuscript and was not allowed to touch. So the grateful student went all the way to Vienna to show it to Buller. Here
That you can
is
touch
what
it now.
you could not have it. Here is it for now. It's for. So he guided him how he should do it. On way back, when he was carrying the manuscript in 1890,
1890.
in 1895, sorry, the Flemish porter who carried Stein's luggage, by oversight or mistake, he dropped the baggage from his shoulder and it got drenched into the seawater rather than landing on the board of the ship
Oh, my goodness.
at
My
the
goodness.
Ostende harbor. So Stein was shell-shocked that the corrosive seawater must have destroyed the manuscript.
Entire manuscript. And manuscript
So
was
he,
manuscript
in
was
the
written on
box,
what?
in the box, he
No,
had
it was
kept in
written
a box.
Bhojpatra?
No,
On what it
listen,
was written?
it was on paper. It was on paper.
It was on
Kashmiri
paper.
paper, which was somehow resistant to water, but the box fell into the seawater and it got soaked in the corrosive seawater. It was a shock for Stein that what do I do now? And I have to return the original manuscript to the owners. Luckily, he opened the box and found that the ink used on this manuscript they had not got washed away with the corrosive seawater. He was relieved, dried the Kashmiri paper, and the manuscript remained intact even after what Stein called Abhishekha. the lustrations of the seawater. And in 1892, when he returned the respective portions to the owners, they never had an inkling that their manuscript, their family talisman, had a lustration in the seawater. It was so perfect.
So perfect. Yeah, there are the scientific oral strain and the Western
But
sciences.
the unfortunate part is, after the three portions of original Raj Tarangni, which Buhler called Codex Archetypus, it were returned to the respective owners, the three brothers of Keshav, three sons of Keshav.
Oh, okay.
Nobody knows the fate of the original manuscript of Raj Tarangni in these 130 years. And nor anyone in the community claims to be descendant of that great family which alone had Raj Tarangni in their house.
What a mystery. It's a mystery.
We don't know the descendants of Keshav today, and nobody knows the fate of the original manuscript of Kalhana's Raj Tarangni, Codex Archetypus. The last that was heard was 1892, when Stein returned the respective portions to the respective owners, the three brothers. We don't know anything about that.
Oh, that's something very mysterious.
There's another anecdote. When
Yes.
Buhler collected the manuscripts, one of the manuscripts was fished out from Dal Lake. It's the only evidence, call it an archaeological evidence or a literary evidence, where we can substantiate that during the times of our persecution, during Sikandar or whosoever, the Pathans or whatever
Yes,
it
yes,
was,
probably.
that we were drowned in Dal Lake, our genos were incarcerated there, and our
Batamazar.
manuscripts were thrown, because Buhler collected one manuscript fished out from Dal Lake.
Are, that's so great.
This is the only archaeological evidence we can quote in a historical term. There was another manuscript of Mahabhashya, Patanjali's Mahabhashya.
Patanjali's Mahabhashya.
But the Pandit who held denied. Buhler says, I cannot give it to you, though I have it. Buhler said, why? Why won't you give it? I'll give you money. He said, if I give you the manuscript, I will die of cold and snow and chill and rain. The old Pandit had simply pasted the folios of Mahabhashya to his ceiling to prevent snow and rain coming and drenching him in his home.
I'll just, Surindarji, to make it more interesting, I'll just have one quote of Oral Strain. Should I?
Yes,
should I just?
Yes, please do it.
Because your anecdotes, they are so original and they are so amazing, and it is a real piece of history. But the apprehension seems to be here also, inhibition in Oral Strain's this quote. In the night ride across the Wuller Lake.
Yes.
In the night ride across the Wuller Lake, a small
the
storm.
goddess doesn't want me that I should take
I'll just complete it.
Yes.
A small storm made me worry for the safety of my manuscript, Raj Tarangini. It seemed as if the goddess of wisdom, Sharda, represented by the waters of Kashmir, was unwilling to let me abduct the manuscript. This is what happened 1200 years ago in the Chinese pilgrim, when the Chinese pilgrim, Hunsong, who had to leave the Sanskrit manuscript in the angry Indus River. Beautifully, yes.
Yes.
And
yes.
you have given the anecdotes. You unraveled and deciphered this entire statement of.
I have recalled this dairy entry of Stein in one of my books. It stays there. So I have another anecdote to share about Stein, my grandfather, and our family.
Let's talk about your father's association, grandfather's association.
I'll tell you. My mother had seen Stein when he would visit my grandfather at Sathu House.
Okay.
And my mother often complained that Stein was a diminutive person. He was not of any great height, unlike the study English people, and he had abnormally small foot. She always wondered why this man should have a small foot, unaware of the fact that Stein had amputated his right toes in his left foot. while he was on his second expedition to Chinese Turkestan, crossing the Great Taklamakan Desert.
Yes.
Halfway through the desert, he got frostbites and
Frostbite.
realized if necessary medical treatment is not made, the frostbite would turn into gangrene and that would kill him. Stein had a choice either to enter Europe, travel another 500 miles of the desert, or return back to Ladakh, where he could take the help of the missionary doctors of the Moravian mission. Stein preferred traveling back. And before he traveled, he realized that his toes had become black and he suspected gangrene.
Oh, my
Lo
God.
and behold, Stein put his left foot on a block of wood, took his ice axe, and chopped his toe. And
Oh,
then he recorded, thereafter, it was only a blunt wound, and I saved the expedition.
my goodness. That's so much. So great.
Stein finally was operated for his amputated toe at Ladakh by Dr. Schmidt in 1908. That's
What a
how
great man he was.
my mother was unaware that why did he have a small foot. She didn't know that
Oh,
it was amputated.
amputated. Okay.
I have
My goodness.
another thing. When my grandfather was on his deathbed, it was recalled that Stein is coming and visiting my grandfather. So there was a whole chaos in the locality by chuna dalo, lime dalo, naliyan saaf karo, घर की लिपाई पुताई करो, झाड़ू मारो. So my mother had a tough time. Then she recalled that Stein, when he arrived at home, my grandfather lay unconscious with paralysis. He could not speak to him. So he went up the flight of the stairs, entered the room where my grandfather lay on the bed, simply lifted his hat,
Oh,
bowed before him, and
my.
took his steps back without showing his back to my grandfather. When he left the door, he paced down the stairs and simply went without talking to anybody.
My goodness.
That was his last meeting with my grandfather.
Such a reverence and affection and value he had, and such a
Often coming to
demeanor.
my father and his association with Stein, often my grandfather would send my father, who also was a student of Sanskrit and had a very legible handwriting. When Stein did not have his assistant or a steno to take his dictations, my grandfather would many a times tell my father, you go to Stein, he has some work and do it for him.
Oh,
Often, Stein was a bachelor. He was a loner, often a loner. But throughout his life, his companion was a dog.
okay.
Stein had 7 dogs in his lifetime. And all dogs were named Dash. Dash 1,
Dash.
Dash 2, Dash 3. But they were not 2 or 3. For him, they were always Dash. Now, when my father would land up at Stein's camp in Chinarbagh or at Dal Shore in some cottage, these dogs would come barking down at my father and howl at him because they thought a stranger is intruding. The dog thought
Including
the
in the
stranger is
ter-
intruding the space of
territory.
his master.
Okay.
Now, what happened? Stein would give the command to his dog to discipline. And lo and behold, they would stand still without bothering my father. Now, my father had seen the obedience and compliance to a command by Stein given to his dog. As a young boy, when I would play some truant or do some mischief, my father would call and I would delay in responding. His famous advice was, be obedient and at once like Dash. My father compared my obedience to
Great
Stein's
adage.
dog Dash.
Great
And he would
adage.
always advise
Sickening
me,
in the family of
be
forest state.
obedient and
Be
at
obedient.
once like dash. So
I will
my
I'll just
yeah,
just one intervention
yeah,
here.
yeah,
Or
please.
besides Raj Tarangani and ancient geography of Kashmir,
Hmm.
what were the other major contributions? Because we have to talk about a great son and other, because your grandfather had worked with everyone and all
You
these
see, my
chronicles. Yeah.
I have the list before. My grandfather worked with Stein.
No, but
My
Oral
great
Stain,
son.
besides this ancient geography of Kashmir and Raj Tarangani, what are other contributions by Oral Stain apart from the administrative and other aspects?
You see, as I told you, the core literature of Kashmiri heritage, particularly of the Hindu heritage or the Kashmiri Pandit
19th,
heritage.
20th century when he came.
Now,
Yeah.
let's start from Raj Tarangani, Ancient Geography of Kashmir, Catalogue of Sanskrit Manuscripts in the Raghunath Temple Library,
Yes, that's there.
Kashmiri Manual, Kashmiri Dictionary, Mahanaya Prakash,
Mahana.
Kashmiri Ramayan, Kashmiri Mahabharat,
Kashmir was
History
the
of
grandson.
Indian Literature. Huh? Yes, please.
Kashmiri Ramayan was from Grayson or from Oral Stain's work?
From Grierson, listen, I'm coming to it.
Okay, okay.
All these were initiated by the influence of Stein. As I
Oh,
told you, when Stein moved to Central Asia, every European scholar asked him for help, how to obtain these, where to go, where to take the guidance. So practically all these editions have hand of Stein.
Oral Stain. That's so much. Godsend.
Now,
He was a godsend
now
personality.
we are very proud of Raj Tarangani. We are equally proud of Nilmat Puran.
Nilmat Puran, yes.
The first Nilmat Puran edition was done jointly by Jagdar Zadu and Kanjilal. 1924, the Lahore edition. It would interest you to know that the second edition of Nilmat Puran was done in Europe, in Leiden, by Varis.
Maris.
It's the only Kashmiri work in Sanskrit, but written in Roman script. Our second edition of the Nilmat Puran, published from Holland, was published in Roman script. So the
My.
second Nilmat Puran is in Roman script. And the third, more popular in recent decades, is Ved Gai's
Ved
1975.
Gai has done a lot of work on. Yeah, Ved Gai. Jammu
And
University.
Ved Gai's Nilmat Puran is essentially based on the Leiden edition of the Roman scripted Nilmat Puran. She did not refer so much to the Nilmat Puran prepared by Kanjilal and Jagdar Zadu. For her, the core stuff was Varis's European edition.
So is that a I mean misplaced appropriation, or just it she thought it is better? She probably thought that is the best way.
Jagdars and Kanjilals had many lacunae, which
Okay,
Varis tried to improve. So
it's an
from that
improvise.
improved version, Vedgai did her own edition and translation.
But Ved Gai
Now
is a
this
great
Nilmat
contribution.
Puran,
Yeah.
now this Nilmat Puran, the best manuscript of Nilmat Puran, which Varis used, was collected by Stein in 1905 and
Oh,
kept his collection in Oxford. When the question of doing a Sanskrit edition of Nilmat Puran came, Vogel was teacher of Varis and he wanted more materials. So Vogel corresponded with my grandfather to seek more manuscripts of Nilmat Puran. And one of the good manuscripts belonged to my grandfather and the other belonged to the Ramchand Kak, the prime minister.
Prime Minister Ramchand Kak in Jammu and
So
Kashmir.
it was a collation of several copies of these manuscripts, but the best one belonged to Stein, and he had
Oh,
collected it through the help of Sahaspat in 1905. And Varis did Nilmat Puran in 1936, 31 years later. He was a school teacher, but Vogel student.
brilliant, brilliant, sir. Brilliant.
Now, when
Wonderful.
Vogel came
What
to
a
learn
journey.
Sanskrit in India, to have a career in archaeological survey of India, He met Stein at Ambala railway station casually. Two English people, they didn't know each other. And
They
he
crossed.
said to him, "What are you looking for?" He said, "I have come to India to learn Sanskrit." He said, "Two places you must go, Benares and Kashmir." And it was there Vogel referred my grandfather. Stein referred my grandfather to Vogel, and he landed up to meet him. This followed a lifetime association, and the result was Antiquities of Chamba, which
Yes, antiquities.
Vogel
Another
did between
book.
1905 to 1912. They were published in 2 volumes. Here I would share an anecdote. When Vogel was collecting these rock inscriptions written in Sharda script, one of the rocks was broken.
Oh,
It did not have the full complete inscription. A part of it was broken. Vogel sent this rock inscription to my grandfather with a letter saying, "It's aptly said that Hanumana crossed Lanka. What is impossible for great scholars like you? Can you imagine the missing portion?" He
oh,
compared him with the Hanumana, saying, "You can better guess what must be the broken portion."
all right.
And finally, the full inscription was read.
Your grandfather was also offered from some university. I have heard from somewhere, Harvard University or some
Leiden University. He
Leiden
was
University.
offered a position at Oxford also, but he
Okay.
declined because of his family compulsions and social order. He did not go. I'll tell you another man who encountered my grandfather was David Spooner. At some point of time, David Spooner also officiated as Director General of Archaeological Survey of India during John Marshall's absence on leave to England. Spooner first came to Kashmir in 1905
Right.
and encountered my grandfather. He encountered Mukundram Shastri and he encountered Harbhat Shastri. Spooner corresponded with both these people, Harbhat and Mukundram, but somehow Spooner recorded in a letter to my grandfather that they did not care to reply me. "I hope they are doing well. Remember them to me." But what's most intriguing in that letter is Spooner writes that in Harvard University, we have 5,000 students. And out of 5,000 students, only 9 study Sanskrit. And they too at the very basic initial alphabets, Ram, Ramo, Ramane, something like that. And then Spooner writes that I am one among us those 9.
Great.
Later on, Spooner requested my grandfather, "Can't you just speak to the Maharaja so that he can give me some appointment in Kashmir?" Spooner was so much enamored by Kashmir and its scholars. He was an epigraphist also, and he was interested in architecture. Many a
Uh,
times he inquired from my grandfather, "Are there any manuscripts of Shilp Shastrani?" That means any manuscripts on architecture, because Kashmir architecture is so famous.
yes.
Avantipur, Matan, Patan, Pyre, so Bunyar. But where are the
Bunia.
manuscripts? Probably, to my best knowledge, despite Kashmir had such a glorious tradition of architecture and building these colossal buildings, no manuscripts on architecture have ever been discovered till date. That's a mystery.
That's so mystery. That's a
That's a mystery. I can't really wash. So,
Spanish
what
classic.
else?
Some Spanish classic that tell us
Yes,
something. Yeah.
yes.
Don.
17th century Spanish classic, Don Quixote. It's considered to be the greatest book for more than 4 centuries uninterrupted. It has never slided to number 2 position in the record of the world literature when lakhs of books and novels have been written. After Bible, the most published, the most printed, and most read book in the world is Miguel Cervantes' Don Quixote. It was published in 2 volumes, 1605 and 1615. There was an American scholar by the name Carl Tilden Keller.
Keller.
At Harvard.
Professor, he was a professor in Harvard?
He was the vice president of the Harvard University board, not a faculty member, but he was a trained chartered accountant, but having strong academic interests. He was so much fascinated by Don Quixote that he collected all the translations that were printed, written, or published anywhere in the world. By the middle of 1950, Carl Keller had as many as 700 translations of Don Quixote, the greatest champion of the promotion of the legacy of this world classic.
And it was done in Sanskrit? Yeah.
Till 1935, Keller did not have a translation in Sanskrit and Kashmiri.
Okay.
Keller was a great friend of Stein because he had funded his 4th aborted expedition to China, to Chinese Turkestan, where the Chinese tell him, "You are a thief and you are looting our heritage, get lost." So Keller funded him that forget China, why don't you go to Trans-Jordan and Iranian border and explore there? So that was the friendship. Now in 1935, Stein went to deliver some lecture series at Harvard under the Harvard Yenching Trust. And there, Keller said him in a childish prank, "Look, Stein, you go so often to Kashmir and you have so many connections with these Kashmiri scholars. Why don't you help me pad up my collection? Why don't you get a Kashmiri or a Sanskrit translation prepared?" So Stein said, "When I go back, since I'm going to explorations in Iran, when I go back, I'll speak to my Pandit friends and let you know about the progress." So Stein went to Ahvaz in Iran for exploration, and Keller followed him. He said, "I had made a request and you didn't help me in that." Stein wrote back to Keller that all my friends of the yesteryears, when I was doing Raj Tarangni, they have passed away. There is only one hope, that my old Pandit, Nityanand, who is there, I'll check with him. If he is attracted and understands this classic, he will do the work. And once he promises, he will deliver.
Oh, wonderful.
1935
That's how your grandfather came in.
Yeah. 1935 October, when Stein was back in Srinagar, he came to know that my grandfather was struck with paralysis.
Oh.
So he inquired from my father, what is the state of his health? He said it's more than 2 years that he has been down with paralysis, but he is now improving. So after learning that there is some improvement in his health, Stein asked my father, "If I give you some work to your grandfather, would you write for him?" So originally, the writer for the translation of Don Quixote was supposed to be my father. Okay. So Stein approached my grandfather that if you accept this task, but you will need a help for someone to take your dictation, and I have already spoken to your son. My grandfather did not disappoint Stein, his friend, and he said he will undertake the translation. But somebody had to write. for reasons unknown to me. My father never became the writer for these translations, but my grandfather asked Pandit Jagdar Zadu if he would join in this collaborative work of translating. So my grandfather, for major part, dictated the translation, to which Professor Zadu also contributed. And there was a reason. Jagdar Zadu had replaced my grandfather as professor of Sanskrit after he had retired in 1931 at SP College. So that was one link. Second link was my grandfather and Jagdar were sewing. My uncle, Janakinath Pandita, was married to the eldest daughter of Jagdar. So they were sewing, they were relatives, and they were colleagues also who had replaced him as a professor of Sanskrit, and Jagdar was equally an eminent scholar.
He was a scholar, great scholar.
So these two translations, manuscripts are written in hand of Jagdar Zadu.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Contributed by Jagdar Zadu, but mainly dictated by my grandfather.
So writer is the guy.
These two translations were forwarded to Stein in Iran when he was at Ahvaz in Kermanshah. From there, under his instructions, he dispatched them to Oxford, where he had left an advice that once these packets received, they should be directly sent to Carl Keller in Boston at 80 Federal Street. So by early 1937, both the Kashmiri and Sanskrit translations landed up with Carl Sheldon Keller. So Keller, when he was getting old, he decided to donate his Don Quixote collection to Harvard University, Houghton Library.
Okay.
He donated in the first installment 500 manuscripts, 500 versions of Don Quixote in almost all the major languages of the world. So Stein wrote him that it must have been a great wrench in your heart to part away with your precious collection, but it's a good decision. You know what Keller wrote him back? Yes, I did have a wrench, but I still possess those two translations you prepared from those two Kashmiris for me. They are in my personal collection still. But ultimately, they will also go to Harvard.
Did they go to Harvard later? No.
Yes, they. From 1945 onwards, when they were last deposited in Harvard, till 2012, they lay on the shelves of the Houghton Library in Harvard, Boston, unknown. It was unknown. It was in 2002 when I wrote a small paper that Kashmiri and Sanskrit translations of Don Quixote exist, that someone in Germany took note of it and went to Harvard to locate the manuscripts.
Wonderful.
The person was Stanislav Jager from Marburg University in Germany. From 2012 to 2017, they studied these translations and came to the conclusion that of all the Indian translations Don Quixote has been translated in, perhaps the Sanskrit translation is the best translation.
Yes. So wonderful. So wonderful.
2017,
to your grandfather.
They edited it and it was published in Germany. So that's how the lost Don Quixote, Kashmiri and Sanskrit translations were retrieved. Let me add it here that Kashmir's greatest contribution to European literature is and alone is Kashmiri and Sanskrit translation of the world's greatest classic, Don Quixote. Kashmir has contributed nothing greater to the European literature than these two translations.
And
that's Don Quixote.
And these institutions are unaware of this.
But unfortunate is till I uttered the word Don Quixote from my mouth or wrote it, most of the Kashmiri intelligentsia were unaware of this great work. Nobody knew Don Quixote.
They
People
didn't
still
study.
didn't know the name Miguel Cervantes de Saavedra. It's an unknown name to them. But that's the greatest contribution Kashmir has
Kashmir.
given to European literature. Nothing greater.
I think your grandfather, I mean, his contribution. I mean, as mentioned by you and as is recorded, and all the chronicles and manuscripts are there. I think he's a man. He needs to be. There needs to be a great documentary on his life and times and his works. It needs to be archived by the main institutions of India, main Oriental institutions
You
as well.
see, you see, Kashmiri scholarship is known throughout the world,
Yes,
particularly in centers like Tübingen, like Oxford, like Cambridge, like Harvard, like Vienna. But unfortunately, that generation of scholars remains unknown in their home. They haven't been cared about. You see, I'll give you another example. If time allows, I'll quickly go through it. I have a
okay,
lot of stories.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
I
we
want.
have the
We'll have part
famous.
second. We'll have part second also. We'll have part second of this also.
I'll just talk about Atharvaveda and close it. You know,
No, no, let you continue
okay.
for some time. No, 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 no. Continue for some time. No problem.
You know,
But we'll, yeah,
the world is also famous about the Atharvaveda.
Atharvaveda, yeah.
Let me tell all your audience, all your friends, and even to myself that the best Atharvaveda of a particular recension called as Shaunak Shakha belonged to Kashmir. And by some strange coincidence, there was only one manuscript of the Paipalad Shakha of Atharvaveda that existed in Kashmir. The European Vedic scholar Rudy von Roth wanted this manuscript for his Vedic studies for his own purpose, but he could not get it. From Baron Hugel's account, he came to know that this manuscript probably exists only in Kashmir. Now, lo and behold, through the semi-quasi official sources, the German professor influenced the British colonial masters, and colonial masters persuaded Maharaja Ranbir Singh that you got to locate and find out this Atharvaveda manuscript, which is needed by Professor Roth. Maharaja Ranbir Singh set out through his own agency to locate, and it was found with Jagdar's grandfather, Pandit Keshav Bhatt Zadu.
Keshav Bhatt Zadu.
He owned this Atharvaveda manuscript, the only copy. When inducements came and the directives from the Maharaja's officials came to Keshav Bhatt Zadu, he declined parting with the manuscript. But how could he resist the Maharaja's orders, the inducements, whatever they might have been, whether they were in terms of money or they were threats or they were some other inducements?
Coherent.
At first, Keshav Bhatt Zadu sent a word back. A Brahmin is prohibited with for three things. He cannot sell a cow. He cannot sell a book or a manuscript. And he cannot sell a daughter. So I can't part away with this manuscript. But inducements prevailed. Keshav Bhatt Zadu also set his terms. Yes, I'll give, but only on the condition that give me time to prepare 2 copies of it. One, he said, Maharaja Ranbir Singh must keep it in the Dogra collection, the royal collection at Raghunath Temple Library. And the other copy, he kept it for his personal use. Now, this manuscript was then sent to Roth in Germany, in Vienna, but not before Buller had cleaned it, given it a wash under the governor's stamp, laundered it, sent it to the bookbinder, and finally the manuscript went to Roth on the single underlined condition on loan. The manuscript never ever returned from 1875 till date to the place of the origin, Kashmir, to the descendants of Keshav Bhatt Zadhu or Jagdar Zadhu and his family, and even to India. The only thing India possesses are the copies on CD-ROM discs, which are housed in Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts.
Oh,
The Germans have not returned Keshav Bhatt Zadhu's original Paipalad Shak Atharvaved.
there is no pursuance from his side, from the government side, or there's no coordination on the subject, or it was never
You see,
important.
somebody has to take these initiatives. There is a worldwide movement. I even once wrote that there is a worldwide movement that the host countries where from these relics were taken away during the colonial times must be delivered back to their places of origin and the places who owned them.
Country, native
In
country.
many cases, this has succeeded, but in cases like Atharvaved, I'm talking, it has not succeeded. You know, after Roth died in 1895, this particular Atharvaved manuscript is considered as the greatest Asian manuscript in any European collection.
Oh, great.
So they won't part it so easily. It's a pride for them.
Yes, that's very tragic. That's a great tragedy. Great tragedy. It's a colossal tragedy. Uh, anyway, with the pursuance like that, with the motivation like that, with awareness like that, maybe in future something like
You
something in
see,
this
same happened
direction may
to
take.
you mentioned about whether that was in birch bark, Raj Tarangni manuscript.
Yeah.
As I told you, the original manuscript was in paper, written on paper. Buller always knew that paper came with the Mughals. But Raj Tarangni was written during Kalahana's time, and the stuff used for writing was birch bark in Kashmir.
Birch bark. That time it was birch bark. Yeah.
So he insisted his Kashmiri correspondents that you got to trace a birch bark manuscript for me somehow. I don't agree that it doesn't exist. Every Pandit told him, we are unable to find, it doesn't exist. One day, one of his assistants who had come in his contact, Pandit Chandram, came with a sunken face and disclosed the story. Buller asked him, why are you looking so down and upset? He said, it's very unfortunate that you had asked for a birch bark copy of Raj Tarangni, and I must tell you that my grandfather had one.
Oh.
But when I was a small child, it was the Pathan rule where they would persecute the Hindus and burn and do scandalous acts against these holy books. My grandfather preferred to throw it into the Vitasta rather than it getting vandalized. That's how the birch bark manuscript of
Was
Raj
lost.
Tarangni was lost. And you know what Buller recorded in his report? Thereafter, there is no hope of getting the birch bark manuscript of Raj Tarangni.
That's so.
You just cannot have it.
Sundarji, let's come to other part of his works. I think it's very huge work. We cannot talk in just one episode of this series.
Yeah,
We
you
can
can
continue with another.
please.
Bloomfield, that Vedic concordance, he is also part of
Yes,
that.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you.
A bit about that, then we'll close it up,
Yes.
and we'll have a
I'll
second
tell
part
you.
of this. Yeah.
When Stein stayed as a classical Sanskritist from 1888 till 1900. When he was in Kashmir, when he was in Lahore, coming and going, did Raj Tarangni and Ancient Geography of Kashmir. did catalog of Sanskrit manuscripts. So he was a trained classical Sanskritist. 1900, he decided to move for the field of exploration and archaeology. Now, when he went to Central Asia in his professional career, the vacancy was created at Lahore for both these positions. Who would become the registrar and who would become now the principal of the Oriental College.
Okay.
Bloomfield was a Johns Hopkins Sanskrit scholar of Vedic studies and a good contemporary of Stein. Bloomfield's student, Alfred William Staunton, a Canadian, was picked up by Bloomfield through the endorsement of Stein to replace him at Lahore. So Staunton came to Lahore as a replacement for Stein, and he was interested in Vedic studies. Now Bloomfield in Johns Hopkins, Staunton in Lahore, and Kashmiri Pandits, many Pandits, Mukundram mainly, and my grandfather, they were in Srinagar. So Staunton took the pioneering Vedic studies in Kashmir. When he visited for just 2 years, he landed in Lahore in 1900 and died in 1902 in Gulmarg. Before that, he had completed Vedic Concordance, that was the dictionary of all the Vedic words, which Bloomfield did from the inputs which he had got from Staunton, Mukundram, and my grandfather. Staunton himself did pioneering Vedic studies on Kathak schools, on Brahmanas, on Aranikayas, through the help of my grandfather and Mukundram Shastri. But unfortunately, he died. Since there was no aircraft in those days, Staunton was buried in Gulmarg in 1902. From 1902 till 2017, nobody ever knew that Staunton was buried in Gulmarg until I persuaded a friend of mine, Bhushan Parmu, who lives in Jammu, and told him, will you do a small favor to me? Go to Gulmarg, go to the Christian cemetery and trace this particular gravestone. Lo and behold, this gravestone still exists. It has not been destroyed by weather, by the elements, and it is fully readable. Now, when Staunton was buried, his widow had already left for Canada. She wrote to my grandfather in 1903, will you not make a pilgrimage to the grave site of my husband? And if there are any grass or any flowers grown there, would you not be kind to send me some as token of memory? My grandfather undertook the pilgrimage, sent it by post parcel, little grass and some flowers from the grave site of Staunton. And it reached Staunton's wife, Anna Booth, on her 3rd wedding anniversary, November 6, 1903. That was nostalgic. And this was some kind of a provocation or an inspiration for me to track Staunton's career and his footprints in Kashmir. He was a Vedic scholar, but unfortunately unknown. Ask any average Kashmiri, was there someone like Staunton in Kashmir? Probably the answer may be no. Nobody knows Staunton. But his grave lies in Srinagar, Gulmarg.
That's very unfortunate.
I can send you a photograph of the grave, which my friend has located for me.
When this whole batch of scholars, homegrown, the indigenous scholars, great scholars of classic times of Kashmir, reporting the classic times of when the whole batch of it disappeared, vanished one by one, then there was not succeeding generations of scholarship was not up to that. They didn't go to that
Uh,
extent. Yeah.
Jugalji, if I may not be taken in a wrong sense,
Yes.
my feeling is that scholarship and learning took a back seat, and all these great eminent scholars were eclipsed because
Yes.
the generation that followed were more concerned with Ninbata,
Nene bata cut
Rogan
copy
Josh.
paste. Nene bat. Jashna
Ninbata,
Kashmir.
Rogan
Jash-
Josh,
Jashna Kashmir.
more little money, little petty money.
Petty money.
Why slog in scholarship and then become teacher or
Those
a
things have
professor,
taken a
and
back
why
seat.
do it? So scholarship and learning was alive till the generation of my grandfather. I'll name Ishwar Koul, Govind Koul, Sahas
Ishwar.
Bhatt, Mukund Ram, my grandfather, and who not. When it came to my father's generation, I think my blaming finger will point to my father's generation. They followed Ninbata. They
Saal.
wanted petty employment.
Saal bat.
I'll tell you a sad story. I don't know whether I should share it or not.
I don't know. I
Given,
mean,
given my father's contact with the Europeans, with these English people and all that, my father was asked, would he be interested to pursue medicine? And it was debated in the home that after doing medicine in my father's time, he would get 55 rupees as assistant surgeon after he qualifies with the MBBS from anywhere outside the state. About same time, my father had also applied for a job in Central Excise as Inspector of Customs and Central Excise. This job, are you hearing me?
yes, yes, yes. Please, please.
This job of Central Excise gave him 75 rupees as starting pay. My father chose 75 rupees and not becoming a doctor. If this happened in my home, it
Can
must
happen
have
everywhere.
happened to the generation of people who had their own circumstances. So,
Absolutely.
small jobs, choti
I think
naukriyan,
वही चाहिए और
money oriented,
our
Ninbata,
institute
and that was it.
our sir
And with that,
our institutions have fallen from the grace. Even I am seeing the institutions like academy, even Sangeet Natak Academy, because I was a theatre person. The quality, the eloquence, the substance it held 20 years before, it is not the same there. There are all
you know,
lobbying, award winning ceremonies.
unfortunately,
I mean, anybody can be picked
unfortunately,
for an award. Yeah, there is no groundwork.
unfortunately,
Yeah,
unfortunately, we had individual excellence in Kashmir. We did not have institutions of excellence
that has always been there. That is
who would
always been
have nurtured them. So they were eclipsed. There was a kind of an apartheid.
there.
Otherwise, this generation of giants who are so much respected by the greatest icons of Western scholarship should
Right.
have gone unknown in their own home. That's tragic.
That is tragic, and it is tragic for even whatsoever we practice. It's tragic for the future generations that the interlocutors and the institutions could not bring forth the glory, the substance, the scholarship contributed by this generation of great scholars in Kashmir. I think that is one
You
of
see,
the
you
greatest.
see, I'll give you a small example. It should not look something personal.
Yes, sir.
You know, I told you that much maligned European scholar in Kashmir is Grierson. He
Grierson,
is
yes.
ridiculed, probably for his Dardik theory of Kashmiri origin. Jugalji, the fact remains when he did Kashmiri language in the Linguistic Survey of India, he termed that Kashmiri is of a Pisachi origin. The Nag Pisach, the
Nag
original
Pisach
inhabitant.
origin, yeah.
The Kashmiri Pandits objected, don't align it to the word Pisachi, who are demons and who are evil spirits.
We are
They are more
Anglo-European.
refined people
An
and
Anglo-European.
cultured. They are
Anglo-European.
cultured. So Grierson was forced not to use Pisachi origin of Kashmiri language, which was most indigenous, about
Even
which the Kashmiri
Katha Sarit Sagar, which was compiled by the Somadeva, was earlier written in Pishachi
not
only.
Somadeva, it was
Compiled. Compiled.
compiled by Somadeva in Sanskrit, but it
Yeah.
was originally written by, I'm
Pishachi. But
also forgetting the
I have
name,
forgotten his name. Pishachi. It was in language Pishachi. It was in Pishachi.
Pishachi.
Yeah.
Now,
That's.
Grierson then, as a linguist, said it has more similarity to the Dardic language. But unfortunately, the Dardic people were Muslim people. So it was seen, the dichotomy was seen that Grierson linked it to the Muslims and their dialect and their vocabulary. But that was unfortunate. He was not to be blamed. He said the origin is in the Pisachi language.
No, he said the
So,
right. That was the honest.
Dardic word was forced on Grierson because of the compulsions, because the Pandits refused and they felt insulted. Now, coming to his dictionary.
Yes,
We all
dictionary.
know
We'll shortly go through it. I mean, your father's role, your grandfather's role in his dictionary and
Yes.
Grierson's other works. Yeah.
Yes.
Let a brief, then we'll
You
have to
see,
conclude.
when Grierson did Kashmir Shabdamrit of Ishwar Kaul in 1898,
Right, sir.
Stein drew his attention to the existence of Ishwar Kaul's incomplete Kosa. That's the dictionary. So, through Stein's help and then resident Adelbert Talbot, Grierson obtained the incomplete dictionary material from Kashmir. Through Stein's help, Grierson asked for a local scholar who will add on to this. So the man identified was Pandit Jugal Koul. No sooner the work on dictionary began, Jugal Koul passed away in 1899. So there was a lull. It took some time, more than a year or two, before Grierson could find a replacement. And again, on Stein's recommendation, Pandit Mukundram became Grierson's assistant from 1900 to 1921. Till then, only 2 volumes had come out. And 1921, Pandit Mukundram also passed away. The dictionary was still incomplete. There, Stein recommended my grandfather for the remaining part of the dictionary, take assistance of Pandit Nityanand. And the 3rd and the 4th volumes appeared with the help of my grandfather. The first 2 volumes appeared with the assistance of Pandit Mukundram. Now, if you see...
And other works of Grierson, like his Kashmiri Ramayan,
Kashmiri Ramayan, Kashmiri Krishna Avatar Leela.
Krishna Avatar Leela, yeah.
Leela. If you read the original editions, you will find and read the contributions my grandfather has made, what Mukundram has made in the preparation of these works.
Oh, that's so great.
In the dictionary,
yes,
Grierson says, whenever I was in doubt, Ishwar Kaul was my last authority. He also writes that Kashmiri is written in 3 scripts, the Persian, the Sharda, and the Devanagari. Grierson writes, the Persian script is the most facile, very easy to write, but most unsuited for the typical phonetic expression of the Kashmiri language. Yes. So he did not.
Ancient Kashmiri.
Coming to Devanagari, Grierson wrote, no 2 Kashmiri Pandits write it in the same form. Everyone is an authority unto himself.
That's true.
But now that a dictionary has to take a standard form, I have adopted Ishwar Koul's diacritical system.
Diacritical. Yes, that is the.
So why criticize Grierson for a patchy job? He
Oh,
says Persian alphabet is no good. He says the Pandits don't write it in the same form. What do I decide? Everyone says do this and do that. And even after 100 years, if we look at Kashmiri language, you say put a dot above the th, I say put a mark above the That's our way of doing it. We have no standard script. Everybody thinks that the script he has devised. My question today would be, what was wrong with the first Devanagari primer which was made in 1912? Did anybody try that? Grierson used it, but none of the Kashmiri scholars used it because some kind of apartheid. Then came emphasis on Urdu and Persian. The government would not endorse it, so it died down its own death.
attitude and the
Attitude,
lackluster
yes,
attitude.
very true.
Anyway, Surinder ji, we had a very long night today, and it was a great
I don't know
scholarly.
how much ignorance I could share with you, but this is
No. I think
intrinsically
that will be
anecdotal.
that will be such a humble word from a great scholar like you, who has been
No,
just trying his hard through his work to just contain the great contributions by the European as well as Kashmiri scholars, which includes your grandfather, Professor Nityanand Shastri ji.
you see
But
the
today we came in stark witness to the great scholarship and the great system of great understanding of the scholarship times and their hard work, their personalities, their growth, their honesty, and their vision and their depth in
you
creating
see,
such modern day
Jugalji,
modern day
I'll
classic.
close this
Yeah.
my interaction with you with one last statement.
Yes.
But for the European scholarship, duly assisted and co-worked by the local natives,
Right.
none of the greatness of our past culture, history, heritage, and whatnot would have never became world famous and known to us had this phase of collaborative scholarship during
Not
the
coming.
Dogras having not been undertaken. And
That's what
here
I.
I must also mention, Europeans touched every type of literature in Kashmir. They did not touch Kashmir Shaivism. Kashmir Shaivism became a rage for the European scholarship only after the 60s and 70s through
70s.
Swami
Yes.
Lakshmanju's help. No European scholar from Buhler to Stein to Grierson to Winternitz and so on and Vogel, they did not touch Kashmiri Shaivism.
What was the
And
reason? What could be the
I
reason?
still wonder what could be the reason. I have no answer for it.
Our closed door this attitude, our not opening up to the. I mean, keeping this thing
No,
indoors.
if they could locate almost 700, almost 7 to
Yes,
800
they could go to that
manuscripts,
extent.
they could
Why not?
also collect these manuscripts, but they did not touch it. Why
My
they
God.
did not touch it, I have no answer. I can't say.
Well, let us leave it to the history. Let's leave it to the more research and
Absolutely,
more understanding
absolutely,
about the past. Certainly,
absolutely.
one thing. And thank you very much,
Knowledge
Surendra
is
ji,
a baton. You got to pass on from one generation to the other.
to another generation.
It adds. There
It
is no
was a
last word in
great
research. There is no last word in knowledge.
knowledge. It was a great
Yes,
enlightening session today. I mean, we have gone into the. I mean, it was really a wonderful scholarly discussion about a subject which is so dear to my heart, which I always wanted to contribute in some small way. And today we have a personality like you, and talking about your grandfather and all other his associates, Mukund Koul,
absolutely,
Koul and other
absolutely.
people, great scholars of the times, and your contribution. And we have been, I think this has been a very enlightening, very informative, very engaging session. And certainly this will go to the archives. It will be probably, this will also be, because now we are moving into the digital world. So it will remain there, and it will be of lot of help to the future researchers, and rather it will inspire people to understand Kashmir and our scholars in the light of 19th, 20th century
I
these
don't know.
classic,
I'll again
classic
humbly
chronicles which
say,
are written by the
if
Western as well as Christian scholars. Yeah.
this interaction has served your purpose and the purpose
Yes.
of archiving something, I would
Yes.
feel rewarded.
Thank you. And
Nonetheless, much needs to be done, much needs to be explored. This is just a tip of the
yes, this is tip of
iceberg.
an iceberg. This is just the
I have
opening.
talked about the correspondence and letters which are at this end of the world, but there are hundreds of letters written by these scholars to these
Yeah.
Europeans which are in the European archives.
Should we go to a
Somebody
quick
has
look?
to look into them.
Should we go to a
Somebody
quick
has to
tour?
look them. It's
Should
a
we go to a
one-side
quick
story.
Surindarji, should we go to
Huh?
quick tour? We have the scope. There is a limit and scope of this program that is not, we cannot go beyond, because we
Sir,
it
I
is
don't know anything beyond it. You can
it,
close.
it is no, we won't close. I won't close.
Huh?
We'll go letter tour. Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Yes, this is a letter written by
Now, let me talk about this letter. If readers
brief.
want to read it, they can read it.
No, we can't read,
Otherwise,
but brief,
remove it
brief.
from the screen.
Yeah, brief.
Now, let me tell you, this particular letter written by Grierson to my grandfather in November 1928 regarding his conferment of the title of Order of Merit. There has been a world debate for decades. Can you remove this letter from the screen?
Yeah, yeah,
If
yes,
the
yes.
speaker, if the audience has read it?
No, I think this gives an, poster and novelty value. That's why I put it there.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Now, for decades, there has been a debate world over. Which
Yes.
is the greatest honor to acknowledge a person? The debate has lied between Nobel Prize and OM. Some people say that the highest honor, highest decoration on the planet is OM. But many in the contemporary times have argued that the highest recognition is the Nobel Prize. Not going into that. Order of Merit has a unique distinction that no more than 28 people can ever have OM to their credit.
Okay.
At any given point of time, you cannot have 29 OMs. Now it means if there are 28 OMs and it's thought that somebody else is worthy of another OM, a vacancy has to create, and the vacancy can only be caused by the death of some recipient of OM.
Oh,
Otherwise, he will not get.
that's a
That's
great.
the uniqueness of OM.
Right.
Sometimes all the 28 OMs are not given at any given point of time. Some are left vacant because it's considered that someone is not worthy to have a OM. So you have ungranted OMs, but you can never have 29 OMs in the world. That's the rarity of OM.
So let's move to another.
Now, once Grierson got it, I come to this letter to show tribute to Kashmiri scholarship.
Quick brief.
When Grierson got it, he writes that I am indeed very honored to have this conferred title, but my honor is increased many folds when competent scholars and friends like you consider that it has been deserved. Now, what better tribute to Kashmiri scholarship you can have that scholars who are competent to judge that it has been deserved makes me more happy.
Wonderful, sir. That's a great honor.
That's a great tribute to the Kashmiri scholars.
Yeah,
not to an individual, not
the
to
Kashmiri
an individual,
scholar.
to a Kashmiri scholarship.
That's so wonderful. Let's move ahead a bit faster.
Yes.
Yeah. Now this is a letter.
Yeah, this is a letter when Minto had visited Kashmir in 1906.
Last
and his private secretary, Sir William Dunlop Smith, sent an acknowledgement letter to my grandfather.
Okay.
This is a Sanskrit letter written by Stein on board RMS Canadiya,
Okay.
Anandiniya, from Pacific Ocean.
Okay.
You can see the ship he was traveling.
Okay.
This
Okay.
is a
That's
letter by Grierson, where he writes to my grandfather, I am too keen to know that you have also written some songs like Hatim's Tales, like Lalwaks. When would
oh,
you come out with them? And he did mark certain linguistic features into Lalwakyani, and that's the acknowledgement through this letter.
oh, that's so wonderful. So wonderful. So great, historic, spectacular, sir,
This
spectacular.
is this is letter. Look to the calligraphic hand.
Yes,
This
yes,
is
beautiful.
letter written by Vogel, seeking the
Vogan.
manuscript of Nilmat Puran from my grandfather. Because if you read the last line, it says, belonging to you.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
So these were the manuscripts Varis used during his European edition.
And this letter
This is the backside of the same letter. You can
is
see
actually,
Vogel's sign, JPH Vogel, written down below.
yeah, Vogel is written there. Beautiful.
Jean Philippi Vogel. This is a Sanskrit letter by Stein.
That's so wonderful, sir. That's so wonderful. And salutation to this genius and his associates of 19th and 20th century who lived and created such a wonderful chronicle, which was corroborated by the Europeans. And you very rightly said, had Europeans not come, had Orelstein not come, I think nobody would have understood the great, nobody would have rather known about this great scholarship work which was existing, or history which was existing, our legacy was existing. So,
Jugalji, I
yeah,
could only pay homage to my ancestor. Nobody knew Raj Tarangni, nobody knew Abhinav Gupta until Buller came to Kashmir.
yes.
What
And
more do
tribute,
you say? What more do you say?
while we pay our tribute to our ancestors, great ancestors, we'll pay tribute to the Orelstein and the Buller and even the Grierson, all these great
I
people who
think they
visited.
deserve our best
And
appreciation.
above all, the Dogra monarchy, Dogra rule, in whose time
Yes,
these all things started
all these
working, and
things
they
happened.
facilitated. They became the interlocutor and facilitator to move these things in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
They patronize scholarship. Thank you
Patronize.
so much for giving
Thank
me
you
the
very much, Surendra
opportunity.
ji. Wish you best of luck, and with all your scholarly pursuits
No,
regarding
no,
this
no.
work,
It's
regarding
a
this work.
humble contribution. The small
It's a
things I
great
could share.
contribution. We are rather humbled that you came today. We'll have
No,
another
no, no.
discussion
It's my
because you are a
honor. It's
great
my
scholar.
honor, and I wish you
Thank you.
many more excellent, better, and more enthralling engagements with your future,
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
future guests.
Thanks a
Thank you
lot.
so much
Best
for the
wishes.
opportunity.
We are indebted,
Namaskar.
sir. We are grateful. Honor.
Namaskar.
Honor.
Namaskar.
So you could see the sea, the world which we visited, which we witnessed today through the narrative of Dr. Surindarnath Pandita Sahab, the grandson of the great maestro, literary maestro, the scholar, academician, tallest academician, and of 19th-20th century social cultural figure, a philanthropist. And we can understand the amount of work, amount of zeal, the amount of the conspicuousness his work holds into these chronicles, he and his associates, which was mentioned by Dr. Panta. And I mean, this is a really amazing world. We must all try to, I mean, go into and divulge into and understand this world of our great legacies, the world of our great esteem and contribution by this galaxy of scholars of this particular age, this particular generation, as well as the European counterparts who wrote, who came all along, had a deep sense of commitment, conviction, and they believed in these people. And then the magic starts working, especially the oral stand and the Buller, and as well as the other great people along with. So a great tribute to Professor Nityanand Shastri today, and we are very much enriched, enlightened, and we have become. I mean, we have a lot of information has come to fore today, and we this continue. We'll continue this effort. Where Dr. Surinder, we're not going to spare Dr. Surindar Nath Pandita Saab, because he's a treasure trove with us. And certainly we are going to talk more about in future about his work, especially which is he's working on the collaborative scholarship between the Western and the Kashmiri the scholars in 19th and 20th century. Thank you very much. It was a great, wonderful night and very informative, very enchanting, very exhilarating, very exciting, and I feel very proud to be part of our legacy, this great legacy. And Dr. Surinder Nath Mottu has made it possible tonight. Thank you very much. Before I go, I'm a Ghalib fan, a Ghalib couplet. Probably I give it's a tribute to Professor Shastri, Nityanand Shastri. एक खेल है औरंगे एक खेल है औरंगे सुलेमा मेरे नजदीक एक खेल है औरंगे सुलेमा मेरे नजदीक एक बात है एजाज मसीहा मेरे आगे जुज नाम नहीं सूरत आलम मुझे मंजूर जुज वहम नहीं हस्ती आशिया मेरे आगे. With that couplet, I would like to say good night, Shabba Khair, Namaskar, best wishes. Thank you very much that you all blew tonight, and certainly I think you might have been enlightened by today's scholarly discussion, scholarly interaction with Dr. Pandita Saab. Thank you very much. Goodbye. We meet next week on another wonderful episode, another wonderful conversation on Children of Conversations, Sunday weekend Renaissance show. Good night.